What's going on, you guys? Today I'm going to be giving you the ultimate how to putt video. So this is going to go over everything and how to make putts more often. Now, I've made a whole bunch of tip videos in the past, but this is going to be the ultimate how to putt video. And most of my viewers, if you're new here, you might not know, but I'm actually a turbo putter like 95% of the time, but a putt that I've been using a lot more often and in special situations, I actually backhand putt a lot. So I'm going to be describing how to putt better, and I'm going to be doing it with my backhand putt to help you guys relate more to the video. Step number one to becoming a better putter is first, find a putter that is comfortable in your hand, and when you throw it, you feel like you can make it go relatively straight. You don't want something that you're trying just because all your friends use it and you know, you're not really comfortable with it, but you use it anyway. You want to find something that's super comfortable for you. Now, don't get me wrong, it's actually really good to try a whole bunch of putters, because even though this is my main putter, you know, it's like a Frisbee-like disc, it's kind of weird, pretty understable, wouldn't work for most people, really works for me. But even though this is my main putter, there's actually times where I'll pick up a putter that I throw, which is a completely different mold, different plastic, and I'll use that for headwind putts or, you know, longer headwind approaches, stuff like that. So it's always good to practice with other putters, but you want to be comfortable, super comfortable with the disc that you putt with on the green. Now, ideally, you'd want to go into like a disc shop, be able to grab each disc, feel which one feels most comfortable in your hand, because really what the thing you want to find out at first is, do you like a high profile disc or do you like a low profile disc? A lot of pros, there's like a mix of what putters they actually like to use. It doesn't necessarily matter as long as it goes in the basket, but if you don't have a disc shop, go ahead and buy some of the most popular molds of putters from each brand, see which one you like. And before we go on to step number two, I just want to say it doesn't actually have to be a putter disc. I've seen people putt with zones. I used to putt with mid-ranges a long time ago, so don't be too discouraged if your putter is like a buzz or something like that. Step number two is to find a putting style that you feel comfortable with. Now, it doesn't really matter how you putt, as long as it goes in the basket. I've seen sidearm putters, I've seen the horseshoe putt guy on tour. You know, I do turbo putts, Johnny McRae does turbo putts. A lot of people do a Macbeth style putt, some people do Simon Lizotte spin putt. It doesn't necessarily matter what style, as long as you're confident with it, it goes in the basket, and you feel like you can consistently do the same thing. Moving on to step number three, now we're gonna actually get into some putting mechanics to make any putt better. Now, before we get into it, let's go through the steps real quick. So step number one, you've got your main putter that you like to use. Step number two, you've got some sort of style that you like to putt with, and now you're here to improve it. Now, just a quick disclaimer for the video, my backhand putt is more of a spin putt. You know, I'm almost like chest height, you know, in between my chest and stomach. I'm not really a push putter when it comes to backhand. So I thought I'd just let you guys know. So if there's some tip out there that seems a little bit odd, if you're a push putter, just know that I do putt like this. I'm not really a putter like this. All right, guys, so step number three, we're gonna talk about lining up to the putt. This is probably the most important thing, because honestly, putting, like Simon Lizotte has said before, I'm sure other people have said it a million times, like putting is almost 90% mental, but that 10% on what you can actually control and do is almost as important as being confident. Even if you're not confident and you line up correctly and you do all the other steps I'm gonna talk about, I can guarantee you're gonna make more putts. Even when you're throwing off the tee, not so great, you're gonna become confident on the putting green, because you're gonna be like, oh, well, I got this all day. It's within 50 feet. I can easily do it. All right, so I'm gonna call step three lining up to the basket. So we're gonna start with the feet. Now, you have to do more than the feet, but I'm gonna start with the foot. Is your foot directly pointing at the pole of the basket? This is the first thing I do. When I step up to the putting green, I look and make sure that my foot is lined up with the pole of the basket. Usually I take a second to set up, but this is the first thing I check. Am I lined up to the pole of the basket? If I put the camera where my hips are, you can see my hips are actually pointed over here. So even though my foot is here, I'm holding it, my hips are pointed over here. So if I was to putt, it's gonna be somewhere between here and here. In best case scenario, you know, it's gonna hit the left side chains and go in, but you can see it almost spit out. And honestly, even though this putt is like, what, maybe 12 feet, I'd still call that lucky, because I was not properly lined up to the basket. It was just so close that I happened to make it. If I took 3 steps back, I guarantee you, it would have spit out left. Why? Because I'm my hips aren't lined up with the basket, only my foot is lined up. So it's gonna end up somewhere between my foot and where my hips actually are, which is, you know, you can see the left side of the basket in the frame here. So what you wanna do is next, you wanna turn your hips. So now I'm pointing straight at the basket, right? The left side of my hip is kind of equal with the left side of the cage. My right side of the hip is kind of equal with the right side of the cage. Now this is just basic. There's other ways to line up. Depending on how your putting style, you might have to tinker with this, but you need to be able to consistently line up, in my opinion. There's very few exceptions where they have a very different way of lining up and it works for them. But I would say like 90% of the time people are putting backhand, and it's going to be like a sort of staggered stance like this, where you're kind of like pushing off your left foot into your right foot, and then it's gonna come up into the basket. A lot of people are putting this way, so that's kind of why I'm relating it this way. So when I do turbo, I'm doing the same thing. Sometimes I do stand like this. If I stand straddle, the most important thing is that your hips are lined up with the basket. Now, if you are a straddle putter, the next few tips are gonna help you even more. But see, at this point, my foot is pointing at the basket, right? And if I put the camera at my hips, so like it's right on my hips right now. See, like I can line up to the basket. See, it seems like it's dead on. So all I have to do is just like release the disc and it's gonna go straight in. Since I didn't really do the other steps yet, it could hit the band, it could hit the cage, but now I'm not missing left or right. That kind of throws that out of the equation. Now there's gonna be times where maybe you do miss left or right, and I think it's just a lack of focus. Because honestly, if you're within the circle, you line up properly, there's not a big obstruction, you know, there's nothing really going on with the footwork. Sometimes the footwork is really important. So in this situation, we're pretty much on flat ground. There's nothing too much that's gonna mess us up. But within 30 feet, I think this is why pros make so many putts, because they know how to properly set up. Step number 4 is controlling the nose angle of the disc on the putt. This is one of the most important steps to putting, because even if you're completely lined up, let's say I throw it 2 nose down, I'm gonna hit that cage. I'm gonna hit the front of the cage, I'm gonna be like, oh man, I just took a bogey when I could have got that easy par. Or maybe, you know, you're not paying attention, you know, you're a little bit left and it would go in, but you threw it so nose up that you hit that band and you just like spit out. It's not gonna go in. Nose angle is super important. Typically, if you're a backhand putter, you're gonna wanna be flat to just slightly nose up. There's almost no point to throw nose down when you're completely in a flat plane. So this is pretty flat, even ground. You don't really wanna throw nose down, you know, unless it's really windy, maybe you're trying to throw it in that basket, cut that headwind out. But at the same time, you really want to just have like a very slight nose up. This is my opinion, because you want it to be able to rise into that basket. You don't really want to have that cage in the equation most of the time. And if you have it just very slightly nose up or flat, there's a good chance you're gonna avoid that cage most of the time, and you're just gonna softly get it in there. Now this is for like the ideal situation, not much wind, you know, not much going on, flat terrain. So you're gonna change the nose angle more when it comes to elevations, when it comes to ceilings and things like that. So for example, let's say we're putting uphill, right? You're gonna have to throw it nose up, more nose up than normal, because you want a chance to rise into that basket. You'll see a lot of good players, really good putters, you know, there's an uphill putt, maybe they're not even that far, like 25 feet, and they hit the cage. The reason why is because, well, it could be extremely, extremely uphill, but the reason why usually is because the nose angle's incorrect and they hit the cage, right? It's not nose up enough, or they didn't aim high enough. Even if you don't exactly aim high enough, if it's nose up, it's gonna have a better chance. So really pay attention to that nose angle when you're putting. A lot of people, like from this range, they'll put super nose down so it goes in that basket, but like if I did it right now, you can see that I would hit the bottom of the cage. You know, very lucky it might hit the top of the cage and bounce in, but that's kind of like the amateur move. They putt nose down from really close up, when it should be just like a smooth, controlled, flat to slightly, very slightly nose up, so it has a chance to rise in the basket, take that cage out of the equation. Step number 5, this one has helped me a lot personally, and it is the practice swing or practice putt when you're on the green. So let's say we line up, right? My foot is pointed at the pole here. Now my hips aren't at the pole. Now they're at the pole. And we've got our nose angle, we're about here. So instead of just throwing it right away, what I like to do is I like to do a couple practice putts without actually throwing it. The reason why is because let's say you believe you're all lined up correctly. If you actually go through the whole motion without throwing the disc, you're gonna feel if you're off balance, if something's a little bit off. You can actually kind of see, like with your hand, like if I just take my hand right now and I pretend like I'm lining up with the disc. So I got my foot and everything, you know, I'm about to do a practice putt. You know, I can feel if I'm lined up or not. You know, if it's going straight at the basket with my hand, then that's a good sign. Then I just put the disc in my hand and it's gonna go straight in. But let's say I do a couple practice swings, I notice my hand's a little bit to the left of the basket, you know, then I have to, you know, move my hips a little bit, whatever I gotta do, just make that adjustment on the spot, and then you're actually ready to putt. And the other thing is, you're gonna get a smoother release in my opinion, because sometimes people rush the putt. You know, it is a bit of a mental thing. Some people really like to rush that putt and it works for them. But I will say, I feel like the more methodical, you know, take your time, do a couple practice swings is really the way to go. I've never putted as good as I do now, and I think that's one of the reasons why. Step number 6, one of the most important steps for putting is actually the follow through. So the follow through just means a meaningful throw of the disc, right? So if you line up and you just waste your throw by just like tossing it up like that, you know, you didn't follow through at all. Sure, I lined up correctly. I'm aiming straight at the basket, but I didn't follow through with that nose angle. I didn't jab it into that basket like I normally would. So you need to make sure that you have a confident follow through. And I know for some amateur players, let's say you're 30 feet away and you want to follow through. I know some people don't have the best distance control yet, but I guarantee you, if you practice on lining up and keep that confident follow through, you know, don't lose it. Even though you're missing long, you're going 20 long, maybe you miss the putt after that because you're a newer player, but you know, just work on lining up. And I promise you that follow through that you feel like is hurting you sometimes is going to really help you down the road. Because what separates a good player from a great player is being able to commit to those putts, even if they're not feeling the most confident. Now let's move on to the final step, step number 7, which is putting IQ. So putting IQ is learning how to deal with, you know, elevations, footing, stuff like that, changing your stance just a little bit. You know, I still got a staggered stance, but you know, it's a little bit off. You know, working with other putting styles, being able to adapt to the situation that you're in. Now, this is gonna separate pretty much anyone watching this video from a touring pro. Touring pros have great putting IQ. That's why you sometimes see like skip putts. That's why you sometimes see like weird Anheuser putts, all these different things, because that's what the pro is saying is the best solution to their problem at the time, and usually it works. So putting IQ, you can normally practice this by playing in courses with woods, because woods are going to give you a lot of tricky lies and whatnot. You're going to have to go on like a knee, even though you're, you know, 15 feet from the basket. You're gonna have to do some crazy nose up putt. You're gonna have to learn all these different angles. But step number 7 is gonna take some time, so don't beat yourself up over it too much. But anyways, let's put all these steps together and make a putt. All right guys, so first step is to line my foot directly up with that pole. And the second step is really the most important, I think, other than the follow through, is the hips. My hips are pointed towards that tree over there. So what I gotta do is I'm just gonna twist a little bit, twist my hips, adjust my left foot a little bit. So I'm pointing straight at this basket now. Now I'm just gonna do a couple practice swings, make sure everything feels like it's lined up. Now let's take the wind into effect. This is kind of step 7. We've got a little bit of a wind. I don't think it's gonna affect it too much, but I think it's most important that we don't throw it too nose up. We don't want it to take us into that band. And we don't want to throw it too nose down, because we don't want the wind to kind of push it into that cage. We got to keep it flat, maybe ever so slightly nose up. But I'm just going to go ahead and do some practice putts. Make sure I can see that disc go straight onto that pole. My hand is lining up with the pole every single time. So I'm going to go ahead and putt now. Straight on the pole, just like I lined it up. This isn't going to happen every single time, obviously. It's hard to keep focus like that, and you don't have 30 minutes or something to go through a putt and talk about everything. But when you're on the course, if you follow these steps, if you practice lining up, if you get comfortable with it, I guarantee you that with a confident follow through, you follow all these steps, you're gonna be a better putter. Now, you might not beat Paul McBeth, but maybe someday if you practice harder. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. One last thing before you go, if you check out my eBay page, I just posted a whole bunch of new discs. Link is in the description. go ahead, pick something up. I usually post rare stuff, collector stuff. There are some cheaper discs here and there. So go ahead, pick something up. All the money is gonna go towards either newer discs to buy and sell or entries to tournaments.